Hi, and welcome to Cali Formula One. My name is Jojo Joseph, coming to you from San Diego, California. We did a little bit of a different intro today because Formula One is heading to Las Vegas. Yes, it's finally been announced officially last week that Formula One will be headed to Sin City. In November 2023, Thanksgiving weekend, there will be a night race, 10 p.m. at night to be exact, which fits in perfectly for that city. And it's going to be a street race. It's going to go barreling down the Las Vegas Strip. Are going to have cars and drivers and the whole shebang right there on the Las Vegas Strip. It's going to be, well, it's either going to be amazing or it's going to be horrible, depending on your preliminary point of view. And we've had quite a few points of view that have come up. I don't think I've ever seen a race announcement be so polarizing since I've been a Formula One fan. And there's been some places like, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Russia, places that are deemed controversial. And here we are going to Las Vegas, and this seems to be the most polarized I've seen Formula One fans in regards to an addition of a Formula One race to the circuit. So that's what we're going to talk about today. It's not going to be a very long episode, but we are going to talk about the expansion into the United States, why it's good, why it may be bad, but why it's necessary. Formula One is a growing sport. It has been growing for several years now, and a big reason of that is the Liberty Media. It's an American-owned company. They bought Formula One a few years back and made rapid changes to the sport. And, not a coincidence that in addition to the changes that they've made, there's been dividends as far as increased viewership, increased fandom. There's been an explosion across the board, but specifically in the United States. Now, Formula One has struggled to break into the United States. And that's not that they've never had races before. Obviously, we've had Boston for a very long time, but even before that, having races at Watkins Glen, Detroit, and even in Las Vegas, they had it in the parking lot of Caesar's Palace back in the day. But as far as tapping into that American audience, as far as viewership for television, fandom, following the sport, that never really happened until Liberty Media took over. And there's several reasons for that. They've made their social media presence really, for Formula One, they've made it really content driven. They've really put out some good content. They've integrated with the teams to make sure that everyone is on the same page as what they present. They allowed the teams to show Formula One footage. That never happened before. And then they were able to just pretty much streamline everything. They even changed race times so it would be more friendly to audiences, not just in Europe, but here in the United States. For me, for example, in California, I didn't have to guess on what times I had to get up or random times throughout the week or the weekends. I know the European races, I'm going to get up at 6. Maybe Russia, I would get up at 5. And then other races will either be Saturday night, or late Saturday, early Sunday. For example, this Australian Grand Prix that's coming up is going to be 10 p.m. 10 p.m. to 12. So it's going to suck for the East Coast people, but it's going to be good for me. But anyway, I digress. Going back, Liberty Media has done quite a bit to expand the American audience. And obviously, the big thing, the elephant in the room, was Drive to Survive, making this Netflix series that really opened up the stories for drivers, not just the championship contenders and, not just midfield drivers, but also backmarkers. You got to hear their stories, see their families, see what they do in their downtime. It made them very personable, taking off the helmets and showing who they are. It's drawn in a tremendous amount of interest and a lot of fans. For me, I've said this numerous times, I would sit there and talk to people and it felt like I was talking to air. I would sit there and try to, tell people there's this amazing sport called Formula One and, oh man, this is awesome. And people would be like, okay, well, how do I watch it? Man, well, the race is at 3 a.m. in the morning, but you could DVR it and they would just lose interest. They didn't want to watch it, But now it's telling people like, hey, I like Formula One. Oh, I've seen that show, or, oh, I absolutely love that. And it's been absolutely phenomenal. And so for Formula One to sit there and say, well, let's take advantage of it, that's a good thing. Why would you not want to do that? You want to expand your audience. You want to, move into an area where people are going to want to watch it. Now, I need to sit there at this point and be very, very clear. I am an American. I do live in the United States of America. But I also want to make clear that I'm not going to be jingoistic about what I'm about to say. I did work in the sports industry here in the United States for over 10 years, almost 12 years actually. So I have a background in that. I'm not a subject matter expert, but I know more than most. And what you're seeing right now with Formula One is that they see, hey, this Austin race has blown up. We could add a Miami race, which is on the East Coast. But we could go to Las Vegas too, and that'll just be a way to just really blow the doors open on exposure. It's a marketing win for Formula One to be able to sit there and say, we're going to have a race in Las Vegas. We're going to do it on a Saturday night, and it's going to be on the actual Las Vegas Strip. That is huge. The fact that Las Vegas is no stranger to having major events. A lot of big events happen there all the time, year round. They're more than capable of handling auto race. But for them to sit there and say, hey, we're going to get all the casinos to sit there and say, from the Bellagio all the way to the Wynn, we're going to shut down the Strip. And it's pretty much going to be the whole Strip is going to be shut down, let's be honest. But for racing from the Bellagio with its famous fountains all the way up to the Wynn, and then the race around the back with the the MGM Sphere, and then the big Ferris wheel. I'm drawing a blank right now, thinking about it, but yeah, it's going to be pretty phenomenal. It's going to be exciting, but it's exactly what they need. This is going to be something that's going to get a lot of people, 370 million people, including people in Canada, including people in Mexico, who are going to sit there and say, wow, this is an event in Las Vegas. I want to see this event, and I may not be able to go, but I'm going to watch it on television. But even for people who are talking about, well, the tickets are going to be expensive. Oh, it's going to be, I'm never going to get tickets. The hotels are going to be crazy. I got to push back on that one because, number one, flights to Vegas, they're typically not as expensive as other parts of the world. That's because there's just so many of them. There's, people constantly going in and out. So the flights aren't going to be that much. Also, Las Vegas has 150,000 hotel rooms. 150,000 hotel rooms. That's the most hotel rooms anywhere in the world. They're more than capable of handling an influx of traffic. Like I said, this isn't the first event that they've held. This is not going to be the last big event that they hold. They're going to bring in a lot of people, and they're used to having multiple events at the same time. And there's also the big thing that they're also used to having, which is gamblers. This is a city that's set up to handle gambling. They need to bring gamblers in. They need to bring gamblers in year round. So because of this, they have a plethora of rooms, but they also keep those rooms relatively cheap. So while hotels on the Strip will definitely go up and hotels that weekend will go up, it's not going to be anything extraordinary. And unlike Austin, where Austin has terrible infrastructure and not that many hotels, comparatively speaking, I don't think you're going to see a price increase that you're going to see that you would see in Austin, and definitely not like you would see in Miami. I think it's going to be still relatively affordable to fly in and get a hotel. Now, coming to tickets, I don't know what the seating structure is going to be. I don't know if they're going to have GA seats, on the Strip. Who knows if that's even possible. I don't know what the visibility is going to be like, but I do know this. If you've ever been to Las Vegas, it's going to be a phenomenal experience regardless. So if you've ever been to Monaco, you could sit there and wander the track, and you could hear the cars, and you could peek through and see them from time to time, which I did on the practice day, which was pretty awesome. Just to be that whole experience and be part of it is pretty cool. In Vegas, it's going to be even more hyped up. People from all over the world, you're going to hear the cars, you're going to be able to see. There's so many different televisions. You'll be able to see everything. You'll be able to hear everything. You'll be able to experience everything. So I just think it's going to be a phenomenal event. I'm really excited for it. I can't wait. On a side note, it is my birthday weekend as well, so obviously I'm going to be even more stoked. Party at my place, or my hotel room, I guess I should say, if you're going to come out there. But yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. Now, is it going to be a good race? We don't know. We don't know if it's going to be a good race or not. That circuit is very straight. There's not that many curves or corners because it is a street race and it's a street race in Las Vegas. So I don't know how good it's going to be. I don't know if it's going to be a complete snooze fest. I don't know if it's going to be overly, dangerous like we were talking about with Jeddah. I don't know if it's going to be, as fast as Monza or faster. I don't know if it's going to be boring like Russia. I really don't know. But that's the thing. Like, I think people are just assuming, well, it's straight, therefore it's going to be bad. But we don't know that. We talked about how Baku is supposed to be a terrible track, and yet it gives us so much excitement every single year. Every single year, Baku is an exciting track. We talked about Jeddah, how it was like overly dangerous, but it also gave us really exciting driving moments as well. And this year wasn't as bad. Mick Schumacher's crash aside, as far as the improvements they made actually improved the racing, in my opinion. So we don't know how good or bad the race is going to be. So I think it's kind of weird to sit there and say it's going to be a terrible race or it's going to be a great race. I do wonder about safety, though. You know what I mean? It is going to be a street track. That long stretch, I think it's over 2 kilometers on the strip. So that does lead to think, how they're going to reach really high speeds and then they're going to return at really high speeds. So you do have to wonder, going that fast, is it going to be really safe? They are going to have to repave. They've already announced that they're going to repave the entire strip in preparation for the race. So those of you who've driven the Vegas Strip who say, "Oh, it's really bumpy," it's going to be race ready. Obviously, they're not going to sit there and have them run over potholes and crevices and all that other stuff that you would normally see in an American road. But I think it should be really fun. I do think that people have a right to be concerned, but I don't think it's really. You're not going to go. Let's not pretend that it's going to be the worst race in the world when they haven't even raced there yet. Now, as far as the schedule, I know that people are upset because they didn't add a race in Africa, the continent of Africa, specifically the country of South Africa, which I think will happen at some point. I do think that you're going to be able to see a race there, and they need to be able to make sure that it's financially viable. And I think that's really what we need to talk about first and foremost. This is going to really sound terrible from one perspective, but it also makes sense. Formula One is looking for places that are going to pay money, and they're going to pay money year over year. And it's going to bring money into the sport. It's going to bring viewers into the sport. They're going to have a ROI, return of investment, on every single race. So that means two things. They're not going to go to places just because they feel like they need to, but they're also going to get rid of races they don't feel are going to contribute to their bottom line. So what I think is going to happen is there's going to be fans who may not see races expanded to areas that they want. I do think South Africa will pop up at some point. I think it's going to happen because they're going to start bringing in money and say, okay, now that we have money, we could go have a track or have a race on a track in South Africa. But I also don't think that they're going to go out of their way to sit there and say, okay, now we're going to have it in 2023 or 2024. I think they're going to sit there and say, we need to see some type of progress. We need to be able to bring in some certain amount of revenue before we could cover that cost. And covering the cost is going to be pretty tough because I do think that they're going to sit there and look and say, how do we not cover the cost? How do we bring investors in to pay for that race and pay all the fees and cover everything so we'll just make money hand over fist on it? I do think that's part of the game. I do think they look at South Africa and say, well, there's potential there, but the financial windfall isn't there quite yet, as it is in the United States. I also think that expanding into Asia, going back to Malaysia, for example, or having a race back in India, I think that's going to be really tough. Financially speaking, do they bring in enough money? Are they able to pay out enough money? I know with India, I was pretty excited when you would watch races. Sebastian Vettel winning a championship in India back in the day was pretty fun to watch. But then you hear that there's tax issues, that there's a huge tax that is levied on Formula One for having the event there, and that caused them to walk away. Now, is it wrong for India to tax them? No, that's their government policy, and that's probably their way of making sure they get something out of it. But at the flip side of it, it did cost them the race. And so you're going to see stuff like that. Right before COVID, we saw, a race that was supposed to happen in Vietnam, and it got canceled because of COVID. And you figure, well, they built a track and they'll have the event. And they said, yeah, we're not going back there. And, that kind of leaves credence to the fact that, they probably thought they were going to make money. And then looking at it, they said, we're not going to make as much money as we would somewhere else, so we're just going to go somewhere else. And so I was excited to see a Formula One race in Vietnam. It's probably not going to happen for a while. So I think what we're going to have to get used to is the fact that they're going to add tracks. Those tracks are going to be in places where they know that they can make money off the fans, off of television, off the organizers, off the promoters, and not have to spend as much money themselves, which is why they're moving to the United States. Now, I know some people are talking about the Americanization of the sport. Oh, the sport's going to be Americanized now. But the reality of the situation is that really a bad thing? I really don't understand that, because when you look at the sports leagues in the United States of America, there's a couple things about them that do stick out. Number one, they're not perfect. Let me start this. They're not perfect, but there are things that do stick out. Number one, they are financially stable, comparatively speaking. Sports organizations in the United States, especially the pro sports, and college athletics as well, are remarkably stable financially. They bring in money, but they also protect their assets really, really well. You're not going to see bankruptcies like you do see in some European football clubs or with Formula One teams even. It's very hard. These teams band together. They found ways to work around monopoly laws like with Major League Baseball. But when you look at, for example, organizations like the National Football League and the NBA, they are remarkably stable when it comes to letting teams in, running the organizations, spreading out revenue, making sure they're going to markets that make sense, and making sure that they're not going to be in a position where they lose money. And even when you look and see what happened with COVID, these teams still made money. They're all claiming they lost things here or there, but no, they're doing just fine, and they came out of that pandemic just fine. So the United States does bring stability when it comes to sports organizations, and I think that's a really good thing. It also brings stability when it comes to marketing and sponsorships. Now, we talked in previous podcast about money in Formula One. We've talked about getting money from Aramco, $450 million sponsorship that really had a play in them not canceling the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix after that missile attack in Jeddah. We talked about Uralkali and their sponsorship of Haas and how that went awry after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and the fact that Formula One needs to go get money. They need to get sponsors. And in running after these sponsors, sometimes they find themselves in partnerships that, quite frankly, don't make sense and don't really put the sport in a good light. Now, I'm not going to sit there and pretend that every single U.S. corporation is great. They're not. I mean, corporations are corporations no matter where you live in the world. But there is a financial stability to these partnerships here, number one. Number two, there's less of a ethical issue. I mean, now, depending, obviously, if they're going to be partnering with oil companies in the United States, that's going to be a whole other can of worms. But I do think that the vast majority of corporate sponsors that they would try to bring in are going to be more, for example, computer-based, software-based. They're going to bring in, some car companies and maybe some oil companies potentially. But honestly, I think they're going for, software, tech, those types of companies, big companies with a lot of money. Read the Googles, like what McLaren already reached out with Google. You're looking at Windows. You're going to go into, soft drinks like Coca-Cola and Pepsi, and you're going to go out for McDonald's, and you're going to get those sponsorship money. And it's going to be huge. KFC, PepsiCo, those types of companies are going to want to jump on board. When you go to Vegas, the casinos are definitively going to have a say in sponsorships, because they're going to sit there and say, we want to bring people to Las Vegas. How are we going to put our casino's name on an F1 car? How are we going to get involved that way? I'm guarantee you Zach Brown is already 10 steps ahead of me on this one, and he's been talking to Vegas casinos on how to maximize that for himself and for McLaren. So there is that financial stability that does come. Now, when you do talk about the Americanization of sport, does that mean that they're going to continue to expand into America? I don't know. I don't think so, except for one exception. I do think at some point they do want to have a race in New York, because they've tried numerous times with different promoters, and it's failed. They've tried to have races in New Jersey along the river, the Hudson River, with New York in the background, which would make a great view. I don't know if it'd make a greater race, but that's what they've been trying to do. And I think that they're going to try to do that again. That's my prediction. I haven't heard anything, but I do think at some point they're going to try to add a fourth race. Now, is that good or bad? The question is, how many races are you going to have total? We keep hearing these rumors that they're going to have 30 races. They're going to expand it to 30 races, and build out that calendar that's going to take pretty much all year long. And I think that makes things a little bit tricky, because I really don't know, to be honest with you, if it's a really good idea or not. I sit there and tell myself, you do need to have, expand where you're going. And at some point you are going to add more races to the calendar. I think 25 is the cap right now with the Concord agreement. But I also tell myself, you don't want to end up like NASCAR. So for those of you who are NASCAR fans, you'll probably know what I'm talking about. But back in the late 90s, early 2000s, NASCAR here in the United States was huge. It was a huge, it was a growing sport. People were really into it. Jeff Gordon was the young, amazing driver. Dale Earnhardt Jr. was the Intimidator. He was the set champion. And then it all just went awry because they overexpanded. It was one family running it. And they said, we're going to do this rapid expansion. We're going to race everywhere, and we're going to expand the calendar. They were racing from February, when the Daytona 500 would happen, all the way into October. That's an extremely long time. And quite suddenly, NASCAR collapsed. Their ratings tumbled. They did keep their core fan base, which was good, but their core fan base has gotten older over the last 20 years. So NASCAR right now is doing this whole push to try to modernize and get back out there and get younger drivers, get more diversity, get more people watching the sport, which I hope they do, and I hope they succeed at it. But the lesson learned there was that they oversaturated their market. They sat there and said, we have a really good thing. Let's go out there and just spread it out everywhere. And what ended up happening was that it actually backfired for them. Is that a concern here with Formula One? Yes. I mean, if they go to this 30 race schedule, are we actually going to sit there and say, okay, well, we're in it for the long haul. Let's watch the next 30 weekends, not even 30 weekends, even more than that, because they're going to have breaks in between. They still need to have their summer breaks and everything. So you have to ask yourself, are the drivers up to it? Are the mechanics up to it? Are the team principals and their budgets up to it? The comms people, the marketing people, the mechanics, the logistical people, are they all going to be able to handle that? As fans, are you going to really put that emotional investment into watching 30 different race weekends? I don't think you are. As crazy of a fans as you may be, I don't think people are going to do that. I think people are going to sit there and say, well, I'll skip this weekend, or I may not watch this next 2 weekends, or, oh, these don't fit into my time frame, so I'll just catch it on a replay or something like that. And that's something that you do need to be careful of. Whether your core audience, where's it going to be, and are you going to lose their interest by, number one, not having races that are agreeable time for them, but also like having too many races for them to follow. It does happen. We've seen that happen here in the United States. You do see it happen around the world, where all of a sudden you're seeing, oh man, I'm watching this sport. It used to be 6 months and now it's 8 months. It used to be so many games here in baseball. They play 162 baseball games a year. It's quite a bit. And then they go into the playoffs, and so for many people, unless you're a diehard baseball fan, you don't pay attention. And baseball suffered because of that. They have suffered because they sit there and say, man, we do lose interest in the summer, which is supposed to be their bread and butter time when people are supposed to go out there and watch. But because there's just so much of it, people just don't pay attention as much as they used to. So that's definitely something that could happen here with NASCAR, or with Formula One. Sorry, it happened with NASCAR. But at the same time, when you do also have to look at the fact that, are they going to expand to 30, or are they going to cut races? Now, this is going to be one that I really don't like to talk about, because I do think at some point they are going to go to some of these European circuits, these AKA traditional tracks, and they're going to tell them, hey, we're going to make money off these new tracks. These promoters are going to pay an exorbitant amount of money to host races. You need to pony up. You need to pay. You need to come up to a certain threshold in order for us to consider giving you a chance to organize and conduct a Formula One race in your country for the years to come. And I do think that certain tracks are not going to be able to keep up with that. The one I'm specifically talking about is Spa. Spa's contract is up at the end of this year, if I'm not mistaken. And I do think Formula One is going to come down pretty hard on them. And it stinks, because I do like that track. I like Eau Rouge. I do like that curve. I do like the forest and everything about it. But I do also know that the business of Formula One is that they're not paying that much money, and they're going to sit there and ask them for an exorbitant fee. The question is whether the track and the organizers can afford to pony up that fee, determines whether they're going to have a race there or not. And that sucks for Formula One fans, because it's a classic track. It's a traditional track. There's been so many great moments there. And we've seen a lot of great driving there. Pierre Gasly, for example, recently. But I do think that that's what you're going to see happen in these European tracks. They're going to start looking at them saying, hey, can you pay us money or not? Another one that's been grandfathered in is Monaco. Monaco, I don't even think they pay anything to organize the race. I could be wrong. If I am wrong, let me know. But I do know that it's an older track. And the racing isn't quite suited, or the circuit isn't quite suited to the bigger cars. It's hard to overtake. It's hard to be exciting. And I do think that at some point they're gonna have a talk with Monaco. Zach Brown today came out and said it's pretty much, it's not good racing and they're not paying any money, so they need to contribute something. And I think he's right. I hate to say it, but I think it is right. I think at some point they're going to have to, sit there and say we need to either adapt this track and be able to get cars to be able to race and overtake on it, but we also need to figure out how to pay to keep ourselves on the calendar. I think they're going to look and say, is it worth having 2 races in Italy? I know that's sacrilegious to all the Tifosi listening for me to sit there and say that, but it's true. People are looking at other races in Europe and say, well, are they going to have it here? Why would we need to have it here? Or we can't leave here. But I really do think that they are going to sit there and say, how do we increase how much money we get from them as they expand these contracts? I do think that there's others that, they're not going to walk away from, or they'll probably try to leverage Formula One will leverage themselves into a better situation financially. But it is it is something that's going to be on the horizon, that European courses are going to be knocked off as they try to move into a truly global sport. And that stinks for the European fans. I know that the European fans, it is a Eurocentric sport, and I know they view it as saying, well, we can't lose something in order to gain something, but business being what it is, and it is a sports business, I do think that they're going to sit there and say, well, it's great that we race in Monaco or Belgium or wherever else, but you need to pay more to keep up. And I think that's just something. I mean, they really are holding all the cards here. They hold all the power, because they could sit there and go to Spa and say, pay us more money or else. And if Spa doesn't pay them the money, they could leave. But they all know if that Vegas race doesn't work out, they could always go back to Spa, because the organizers will say, yeah, absolutely, come back here. So they hold all the cards at this point, and they hold all the power. So it is interesting to see how it's all going to play out. My prediction is they are going to expand into the United States. I think they will have 4 races here. They are going to try to take that build up and that extra revenue, and they're going to try to have a race in South Africa, but I think it depends on them getting organizers to pay an exorbitant fee there. But I also don't think they're going to go to 30 races. I know, in my mind, that they want to keep it at 25. I don't think they want to rip up the Concord Agreement unless they could show that they're going to make money, a ton of money for these teams hand over fist. So I do think that there's going to be circuits on the European leg that are going to get cut. But it's also interesting because we have news that Volkswagen Group is going to allow Porsche and Audi to come back into Formula One. I think they're going to come in as engine suppliers. I might be wrong. I don't think that they're going to expand teams, because I think with that Concord Agreement, these teams are capping the number of entries. The reason why is they don't want to split all the prize money. So that's something to be aware of. Like, are they going to sit there and say, well, we'll increase the number of teams and you'll get plenty of prize money because we'll increase the number of races? Maybe that'll happen, or they'll put them on some type of weird, have them pay an entry fee or something like that. But right now, I just think what that's going to end up happening is I think Audi is looking to buy McLaren. Those seem to be the rumors. And Porsche will have a partnership with Red Bull, which should be interesting, because Red Bull, when Honda left and Red Bull took over, quote unquote, took over with Red Bull Racing or Red Bull Engines or whatever, I think they're going to be pretty stoked to have Porsche bring their phenomenal Le Mans expertise into Formula One. Audi as well. Audi's had a tremendous track record there as well. And who knows if that's going to bring in other engine suppliers like Toyota or whoever else back into the fray. Maybe even Ford. Who knows? But yeah, I think that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. So, the sport that we are loving is definitely going to change. It's going to change rapidly. The question is, how does Formula One handle that rapid change? Do they, do they handle it well and add these races and it drives up viewership and enters in a new era where it's a truly global sport where anyone around the world could follow it? Or is it going to turn into more of a rich man's fantasy? That's something we need to talk about too, because, coming into the United States, the prices in Austin went up quite a bit. They sold out last year and the prices went up. I don't think they're going to get rid of Austin. I really don't. I would be very shocked. I mean, again, they may sit there and try to jack up the price for the organizers, but I don't think they'll get rid of Austin per se, because it is a phenomenal track. It's a fun track. The drivers love it. It's probably one of the best pure racing circuits in Formula One. So I don't think they'll get rid of that. You look at Miami. Miami priced out everyone who's middle class or upper middle class, even with these expensive tickets. They don't have general admission. They're going full foo-foo high class. I mean, there's even rumors now that they're going to build artificial lakes in the middle of the track and put yachts in there, and it's in a parking lot in Miami. So that's how crazy over the top that they're going, and Vegas is going to be what it is. So are these experiences going to price out the average fan more than they already are? Well, you look at Silverstone, the prices went up. You look anywhere else, the prices are going to go up. That should be your warning sign, your red flag. The fact of the matter is, when you look at attending these events, if the prices are going up already, that tells you that they're going to go up even more later. And that tells you that these organizations, these organizers are looking, saying we need to figure out a way to drive up revenue now, because we know that Formula One is going to ask for more money to host these races later. So that's your sign right there. I wish I could paint a rosy picture and say, no, the average Joe will be able to go to a race, and the average Jane will be able to go to a race, and they'll meet and fall in love and go to races every single year after that. But I don't think that's the case. I think that Formula One has seized a cash cow right now, and they're saying, man, we're in a corporate world. There's a lot of corporate sponsorships we need to tie in. I think they're snake bit over the last couple of years. When you look at Rich Energy, when you look at Earl Colley, you look at this elephant in the room, which is Aramco, where they're, they have a title sponsor that's more or less saying you must race in Saudi Arabia, even if there's a terrorist or a missile attack or anything like that. And they're saying we want to get as much money as we can, but we want to be stable and not have to worry about things going south or things going bad, at least for the next few years. So that's where we're at. Is it necessary? It is. It is absolutely 100% necessary. This is something that needs to happen. All sports organizations grow one way, shape, or form. If they're not trying to grow, they're not actually doing their job. It's just a matter of how fast you grow and how much you allow yourself to grow. You don't want to be oversaturated. You don't want to sit there and expand too much. You don't want to spend too much money. You don't want to sit there and tune out lose your core fan base. But at the same time, you do have to do something. When you look at Formula One, where it started off 10 years ago, what it was like. I mean, if you were a fan 10 years ago, watching it was just a different experience. Even now. And when you look at it now, where they try to make it as user-friendly on television with Formula One TV, they try to make it as interactive with social media, they try to make it as presentable and packaged and content-driven with Drive to Survive and etc. But I do think, they do look at it and say, there's a whole bunch of markets we need to tap into, and we're going to tap into those markets one way or the other. There is going to be an expansion into Asia somehow, but I just don't see it happening super soon. I know they're going back to China next year, and Zhou Guanyu is going to be a big part of that. But I do think that at some point they are going to look at Asia as well. I think they'll sit there and say, can we have more Asian races? Can we have races in South Korea? Can we have maybe go back to Vietnam? Maybe, we'll see. But I do think maybe have a second race in China even. Who knows? But I do think that the future of Formula One is going to change rapidly the next couple of years. And I do think that as far as who we are as fans, it's definitely going to challenge us. It's going to challenge us because we're going to have to look back and say, wow, a lot of things that brought us into the sport are going to be a lot different in the next couple of years. So that's business. That's the way it is, and that's what we're going to have to deal with. But for now, we are going to have some familiarity coming back. We are going into Australia this weekend. I'm pretty excited about this. It should be pretty, the Australian Grand Prix. It's great to have this race back. After, I can't believe it's been 2 years when, they had drivers sitting there wondering if they were going to have a race, and they were pretending everything was going to go great, and then McLaren dropped out because they all got COVID, and we were all wondering how serious COVID was, and next thing you know, they're like, we're canceling everything. So, yeah, I mean, at least we're going to be back there. It should be pretty fun. I'm pretty excited about it. And especially with the season we're having so far, it's shaping up to be a pretty exciting season. Ferrari is, the dominant foot right now. They are, I mean, Charles Leclerc is having an amazing start to the season, but so is Carlos Sainz. Max Verstappen had a great win in Saudi Arabia. The Mercedes team, for all their, woes, are sitting in fourth and fifth. George and Lewis are in the fourth and fifth spot right now. I don't know what Mercedes is going to bring to the table. There's all this talk, oh, they're going to do this, they're going to do that. I honestly don't know what they're going to do before Imola. So who knows if it's going to work out or not work out. The best they could just hope for is just to qualify well and keep pace with both with the Red Bulls and the Ferraris, and we'll see what happens there. Mick Schumacher should be back, but so is Sebastian Vettel coming back off of his stint with COVID. Mick Schumacher is healthy, and he'll be back as well. So we'll see Sebastian Vettel back in. Mick Schumacher and Haas, they had $1 million price tag on his qualifying crash. It's quite a bit of money. But hopefully they'll be bouncing back as well, and we'll get to see the American team do extremely well this weekend. Not being biased in that, of course. But in any case, though, we will be coming back to you after the Australian Grand Prix. So it's going to be Saturday night here. It's actually going to be at 10 o'clock at night. So in all likelihood, I'll probably wake up early the next morning and just do the show then. I'm not even going to do the math on when it's going to happen for you guys. I'm sure it's going to happen a lot later or earlier for you all. But in any case, though, I hope you all have a great week. I hope that you all have a great race weekend. It should be a lot of fun. And we'll touch base after Melbourne. Have a good one. This is Jojo Joseph with California One. Have a great day. Bye.